All right, so we are back. I think it was 2 months ago that we were last here.
Wow, 2 months ago?
Yeah, it was 2
It was
months.
2 months ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really busy lives.
2 months went by quick too.
Productive lives.
Yeah.
Again, so my name is Bianca Hughes. I'm an associate professional counselor. I'm in private practice in Roswell, specializing in perfectionism, primarily working with women. Also work in a mental health hospital as a PRN therapist in an outpatient department. And I have to my left.
My name is Justin DeBose. I am a professional counselor in the state of Georgia. Currently specializing in children, adolescents, and family counseling for both males and females.
And I'm Jared Washington, associate professional counselor, work with children and adolescents, and also work in a psychiatric hospital as a weekend lead therapist.
Oh yeah, you are the lead now, aren't you?
I am.
Feels good to say that. Yeah.
He's a good lead therapist.
Better than the last one.
He was the last one.
Yeah, he was the last one. Why would you say that about yourself? All right, so today we wanted to talk about, still staying on the subject of mental health in the Black community. So in particular, we wanted to talk about incarceration. So this started for me, if anyone has seen it, I've watched the 13th on Netflix. But the one that really, really hit home for me was the Khalif Browder documentary. I don't know if anyone's seen it. I do encourage you to see it if you haven't. I will say this, the first episode, is a few, I think it's 5 or 6 episodes, was really, really difficult. I literally had to push through it. I was crying. I'm a crybaby, but I was crying through various parts because it was just so heart-wrenching. Just to give you a background, he was a young boy arrested in New York when he was 16, accused of stealing a backpack, and he spent 3 years in Rikers Island's prison in New York without ever being convicted. And he was released and still wasn't convicted, and he was given many different opportunities. What I loved about him, he was given opportunities. He was given plea deals, but for him, he knew he didn't commit the crime, and he said he was going to stay and prove his innocence. And in that process, he got in a number of fights, was picked on by guards, was brutally treated. He spent 1,000 days in solitary confinement.
Wow.
And it is recommended that you just really need to just only 15. So he spent 1,000 days and was never convicted. So he came out, talked about his story, and then of course he had a lot of if you're in confinement, you know, anyone who knows, like, we are created to connect, we are created to belong. So if we are in confinement, we're gonna react to that situation. It's really interesting that the animals can't even do that.
No,
you know that?
No one is meant to be alone.
Yeah, they fight the rights for animals versus human beings. Yeah. So he was in there for 1,000 days, and of course he had started to hear voices, psychosis, depression, all different types of mental illness. He came out, wasn't convicted. He still was harassed when he came out, but he was a fighter. He was doing really well in college and things like that. He was harassed, and then he unfortunately completed suicide. So that was a really, really sad thing. After all he went through, you know, he's a hero. I mean, they're closing Rikers Island now.
Really?
Yeah. It said it's going to take about 10 years.
Wow.
That's actually really good.
Yeah, they're going to close it. And if you ever see it, and if you know, the majority of the population is Black.
Oh, of course. Of course. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, so that's why we're here.
Course.
So that's what really propelled me to talk about this, and really wants me to continue to make a difference. I think like probably a few days after I connected with someone, I was started to give talks with the public safety officers about mental illness and about addictions, just because of that, to just help further that education, because it's something that really touched my heart. So I talked to both Jared and Justin about it, and so we just kind of want to share and kind of discuss a bit more about that, about the mental illness and being incarcerated and the impact and the effects and the family, because it's not just one person that's affected, it's a whole family. So Justin, you want to talk about deinstitutionalization first and explain what that is and how that impacts us?
Yeah, so the picture I'm finna paint, guys, is how we got to this point in the first place. When you think about the history of mental health and mental health treatment, the big scary word that got thrown around a lot was asylums. Way back in, let's say, the 60s, late 70s, before that, you used to hear about all the horrible experiments people would do on mental patients in asylums. So they figured, let's close all of these terrible places down and that'll make things better for mental health. Well, they did that, and the problem was that didn't really fix the mental health issue because they didn't institute enough programs to actually help those that are mentally ill. So they closed down all these asylums and they let all of these mentally ill people just out onto the streets. Without any sort of support. So hence the homeless problem that we have today. So as this continues on, what ends up happening is they figure we've got to get you got these homeless people on the streets who are probably dealing with mental health issues who unfortunately are not used to the world in the way in which it works now. So they start to engage in behaviors that people find very unsettling. Let's say unsettling. And they, of course, what's the natural order? Call the police. And after they call the police, individuals get sent to jail. And after this happens for years and years, the jails get overpopulated, and eventually there are more and more jails. They're bigger jails. And so what ends up happening is the prison system ends up becoming the new asylum. They deinstitutionalized all the asylums and instead put everyone that would normally go in one into prison, which creates a whole nother set of issues, because now instead of just being individuals with mental illness, you're individuals with mental illness and a record. So now you have two things working against you. And that's kind of what's led to the point that we're at now. We've talked about mental health in the Black community before, how a lot of things that Black people deal with gets diagnosed as mental illness. And then couple this with the fact that now that we're incarcerated at a significantly higher rate than any other group of people, you end up wondering how many of these people that are incarcerated are actually criminals and how many are just dealing with mental illness. And you'd be surprised about the numbers, to be completely honest. So that's where we're at. That's where we've gotten to now, currently.
Yeah. And so how that impacts us as a community, I think as you guys will know, is that African Americans make up 13%
of the population.
In America, but account for 36% of those in jail. So you can only just imagine how many the percentage of those people also will also have a mental illness in there as well.
Many of them
do, and not getting the treatment that they need. And also want to make that distinction between the jail and the prison. Yeah.
There's a difference. Yeah, so
very true.
Your jails are pretty much where anyone is housed who just was arrested and is waiting trial or waiting for bail and things like that, where your prisons are your individuals who are already sentenced to time and are serving out their time. So
yeah, they're waiting to be transported to another prison, and sometimes because they're overcrowded, then you've got a whole nother mix of everyone else in the prison, and so they're not also, or in the jail system, and they're also not getting the care that they need when it comes to the mental health. And then we're not going to forget the war on drugs, back in the Reagan administration, where people were just being put in jail for taking drugs, not even necessarily just
during that administration. They don't almost anything.
For taking drugs. So then, and that just goes to back that addiction is a disease. So just imagine you're being locked up because you got cancer.
Right.
Okay. You're being locked up because you got diabetes.
Yeah.
So many people say, well, they need to be locked up. They're on drugs. No. This is a disease, addiction. So these people have an addiction and they're being arrested because they're using drugs, have a small, and they have versus going to get the treatment that they need. So that increased also the jail population quite substantially.
And Bianca, I see someone on my actually brought up a good point.
Yeah.
Saying how there you go, I don't want anyone in Jared's people to be missed. How the institutions weren't meant for treating mental health. Something about piggybacking back to the asylums for a second, about how a lot of times many people got dumped off in asylums because the family didn't want to deal with them anymore as well, and that individuals acted quite strange, so the family dumped them off in the asylum. And kind of funny because the prisons and the jails actually still kind of became that, where you dump people off and kind of forget them. So that's a great point. Appreciate that.
And even to go back to the war on drugs, where during the Ronald Reagan era, and it even kind of started with Nixon a little bit too, but
it continued until continued as well. He apologized.
Super predators, right?
He apologized.
Yeah, he apologized for it, but
now.
Yeah.
But even going back to the war on drugs, if you even look at when the time that they were giving for crack cocaine in comparison to coke, to powder cocaine,
right?
And if you look at the demographics of who were using crack cocaine in comparison to cocaine, powder cocaine, then you see there was like a hidden agenda there,
right?
And that's what we're getting at too. We're getting at how the prison systems are used to house
straight up
people.
Mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration is used to house
modern day slavery.
Modern day slavery. That's exactly what it is. And if you go back and read I want to say it's the 13th Amendment, where it says that slavery is abolished unless convicted of a crime.
Correct.
I mean, the proof is in the pudding right there. I hate to be corny with it, but it's right there in your face. So I think that's just something also to touch on when we're talking about the war on drugs, and we're still seeing it today. Or kind of now they're kind of turning it to like this opioid crisis, and they're looking for all this treatment because now we're starting to hit different types of
heroin individuals are victims.
Yeah.
Individuals that use crack are addicts.
Yeah.
Which don't get me started.
Addiction is addiction. And so that part about the addiction piece still covers mental health. So I don't want anyone to feel like, well, that's addiction. This is not. No, this is the whole realm of the thing. So now it's a huge thing with the opioid crisis, right? Because now it's hitting the more wealthier homes where they're overdosing, and so now there's a change. And that's another big thing, because it'd be interesting. I tend to find, and I was having a discussion with another therapist, and she's actually in California, and she said that she's a white therapist, and she admitted and she realized, because she works with a lot of people in a program, and noticed that how the majority of the people who had committed a crime with a mental illness were in treatment, but she never noticed any black people in treatment. And even for me, I've seen some people, the DUIs and stuff, come into treatment. They're not black. Yeah. They're not. They go to the jails, and this also goes back to
wasn't offered to them.
It wasn't offered.
Straight up, it wasn't offered to them.
Sometimes, and there's also I know a program where they actually have to pay instead of going to jail, that they pay to go to treatment. Some people can't afford to go to treatment. With the Khalif Browder. The bail was $900.
Right.
Family couldn't afford $900 bail.
Right.
For some, they're like, oh, that's not a lot. For some people, that's a lot of money. The whole family, he had brothers, sisters, mom, dad didn't want to pay, apparently.
Right.
This is what it said on the documentary. But they didn't have $900, and it took them about 2 weeks. By the time they got someone to give them the money, they said no, because he was on probation and not letting him out.
Right, it could have been anything.
Yeah.
I can let them out for whatever reason.
Could have been even. So that's another big factor as well. And those are the people that are also getting arrested. The people who are homeless, the people who are on low income. The education is also low. It says it here. This is a really good, I just want to share this. It's called The Incarceration's Front Door, the Misuse of Jails in America. You guys can look for it online. It's a great breakdown of the jail system and the statistics and the numbers, and just about the whole system, basically, that it needs to be changed because it's not doing what it needs to do.
Right.
There's no rehabilitation. People are just going in and out and they're not being treated fairly. So it says here, 47% of jail inmates have not graduated from high school or passed the general education development GED test. 47%, and you said what we were discussing earlier about
third grade.
The third grade, they build prisons based off of third grade reading level. So if you're depending on your level of reading in third grade, they build prisons based upon that. So it's really sickening. It's really sickening, and just to be blunt with it, I mean, if you just think about it. Like if we look at Khalif Browder, right? If we look at, he's sitting in jail waiting, not convicted, sitting in jail for 3 years, right? And some of us may be thinking like, how is that possible?
Oh, because his court case, he went to court like 30 something times.
Oh, sure.
And they kept saying it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready. So about 7 different judges, it's not ready, it's not ready. What? What do you mean it's not ready? Look.
They get paid per day per bed. You know, so it's about money too, and especially now they're starting to privatize these prisons.
Oh yes.
They're starting to privatize these prisons. They're starting to privatize these prisons, and so you know it's all about money.
All of it is. Definitely is.
It's all about money, and it's all about color.
Yes, you can say that.
Oh yeah, please speak freely.
Gary, he said it quietly. It's all about money. It's all about color.
It's all about color.
No,
it's all about money. And it's all about color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we want to highlight that it is about that, and everyone's like, well, I thought you wanted to talk about mental health, and well, thing is called incarceration and mental health. So what happens? I also want to talk about in general when someone's arrested and they're going into, and this is just arrested. I'm not even talking somebody who is actually convicted and sent to prison. At the front.
Yeah, we just arrested. Okay.
And they go in, they're the breadwinner, or they bring money, and there's no money in the home.
Oh,
whatever
perfect
the
place
case
to start.
may be, right? Now you're arrested. You especially if you didn't do anything, right? So imagine you go arrested, you didn't do anything, or it's something minor or whatever, and so you might not have money for bail, your family might not. So now you're staying even longer. You're not earning money. You're getting frustrated, especially if you didn't commit or do the crime. So that's impacting you as a person. Like, how did I get here? Why am I here? I didn't do anything. Or, this is minor. Why didn't no one have any money? I'm really trying to make it day to day. I finally got my break and now I got arrested. Maybe it was a ticket or something. And I'm trying to catch up and now I'm in jail.
Look,
right?
and when you end up getting arrested or you have to go locked up for a small period of time while they figure out what to do with you, every day you're not at work, of course, is a no call, no show. Which after, I don't know how many people's jobs will give them more than one of those. But chances are you get one and you're done. So let's just say hypothetically, that's the breadwinner of the family who gets held overnight, 2 nights, 3 nights, over a weekend, whatever it may be, and he's missed a few days of work. Now suddenly that breadwinner can't make money for the family. So again, it all plays into the mental health and the stability of the black family. What happens to that family at that point?
Now the whole family's stressed out.
The whole family's stressed out.
Overwhelmed, anxious.
Depressed.
Very.
Getting some depression in there now, right? How are we gonna make some money? What are we gonna do now? Stressed out, right? For some people. So now that's impacting kids. Then we're talking about food. What are we gonna eat? Then we're talking about malnutrition. Now we're talking about we can't focus in the school. This just goes on. It's not just that straightforward. And I know some people are going to be like, well, they gave me the crime. Da, 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 da.
Oh, I love that.
I am talking from the beginning when you are arrested. And it is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But people are treated like they're guilty the moment they're arrested.
Until they're innocent, right?
Right. And so that still impacts that, and that's impacting the family. Not to mention the money factor. If they do get the money together for bail, and I have experience trying to get someone out of bail. That stuff was not easy because it's not just about the money. Then you have to prove that you work to keep. Like, it's serious.
Yeah.
To get someone out of bail on bail is not that straightforward, and so you're running around doing all these things and all these stresses upon the family that impacts them, and is also impacting the mental health, right?
Yep.
Right.
So, and just imagine if you have somebody who's arrested who does have schizophrenia, right? Or they have bipolar, and they're in a manic state.
They are not right.
And
They're not
in
going to
their
respond.
right mind.
They're not going to respond well to being
They're not
arrested.
going to respond well. If they got schizophrenia, they're hearing voices, they're paranoia. Now they're in the jail system, and then remember we're talking about jail. They're just arrested, so they're not necessarily, because the police have, if they commit a crime, the police in all rights has to arrest them. Like, that's just what they have to do when it comes down. They often don't have that choice. They often can't 10-13. And 10-13 is when someone is
They
put
can't
into,
be involuntarily committed.
Yeah, they're involuntarily committed to psychiatric
But
hospital.
Bianca, something I want to go back to real quick. You talked about that stress that comes over the entire family when one individual gets arrested that's a member of that family. And when you think about people's decision-making skills,
Or your friends.
or your friend, good point. You think about people's decision-making ability when they're under that amount of stress. And you're thinking about, are they going to make proper decisions? Are they going to make well-informed decisions? Or do they feel rushed? Do they feel like they have to do something desperate because now it's in a desperate situation? And let's especially take this current climate, not even political, just in the with the prison system the way it is now, with the number of individuals that have been killed by police. You hear stories about single mothers, well, not single mothers, they become single mothers, about mothers who are terrified whenever their child or their husband or anyone gets stopped by a police officer or gets arrested because you don't know whether they're coming home or not. So think about what that's doing to that individual's mind at that moment, and you're thinking, what decision is she gonna make? What decision is the family gonna make in the midst of that? They're probably extremely hurried, extremely rushed, and more than likely they'll probably do something brash because they're not thinking right.
Exactly.
And it makes perfect sense for them to think that way because they don't know what's about to happen to the individual.
Exactly.
Keep going.
And another thing to even touch on is when we're talking about somebody who's dealing with schizophrenia, that may be hearing voices and dealing with like paranoid delusions, or talking about somebody that's in a manic state, and they're dealing with police officers just on the street, dealing with individuals who don't know how to manage these illnesses or know what it even looks like, and they handle it in brute force. And then, so even before they get arrested, we can start talking about police brutality, right? I've read plenty of stories of police officers tasing or tackling or doing, using brute force against individuals who, in my eyes, because I'm a mental health therapist and I know what to look for, doing it to individuals who clearly are in a psychotic break or dealing with some type of manic episode or anything like that. And it's interesting to me that police officers aren't trained on mental illness. And
no,
actually, you just did.
Yeah, I just did.
You just did one.
I just did. So I don't want to.
Not enough. Let's say not enough.
Well, let me say this. It's called the Georgia Crisis Intervention. And what they do is they provide training to public safety officers. And I just did this 2 weeks ago. So I do know that it is available. And it's a week-long program. So I will say that. And the guy who's over it, had been a police officer for 30 years. So I was talking to him about it, and he really wanted to drill in that they're human beings and give them the understanding of the mental illness. However, they are educated, but if you don't see it enough, there will be some limitations, and you're not always, and they're still trained a certain way as police officers to think and do things a certain way because they're protecting
Bianca, I believe that exists. I believe that it's out there. I would love to see the attendance rates of such a program, because I truly don't believe that enough people that are police officers and things of that nature are actively in such programs like that. That's just me.
I think there were about.
That's just me. I would love to see the attendance rates of that program like that.
Well. Now I'm saying it's there.
Right.
What people do with the information is a different thing.
Right.
So when I did it, there was about 20 people, and they actually called me back, so I'm doing it again next month.
Great. Please
keep doing
it.
And it's a different place.
Please keep doing it.
And well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. After watching Khalif Browder, I knew another therapist who did it, and I got in contact because I really wanted to make that impact. And so we give the information, but you have to get used to it. You have to remember they're still trained as public safety officers.
Correct.
So they do think a certain way and see things somewhat differently to what we do as therapists. And then you don't have the human element of fear in the situation for both the officer and then both the person who's being arrested, especially if they have a mental illness like the schizophrenia, or because that person has paranoia and is seeing his hallucinations.
Flashing lights with individuals pulling up.
Flashing
lights, unknown individuals pulling up, shouting at them. Those three things right there will cause an individual with schizophrenia to go off.
Yeah.
It's not going to end well.
Yeah. So we also just have to think about that impact, and then when they're being arrested and things like that, and then you have that, and if they don't have the knowledge, and then how does that now affect the family?
Right. How does it affect the family? Oh man.
It keeps people.
When an individual becomes quote unquote a statistic, how's the family affected? Well, the shortest way I can answer that, Bianca and Jared, is let's say they started let's say everything started with the Zimmerman case, of course. How many years ago was that, Jared?
It's about 3 or 4 years now.
I want to say it's been
about 3 or 4 years
since the case, and then the crime happened when?
Maybe about like 5 years ago.
About 5.
Yeah.
Look at what's happened. Look at what's just happened within the community in the last 5 years. To the amount of paranoia that exists now. And then when you think about the number of people killed, and then understand, I don't say it's to minimize it to everyone watching. I don't say it's to minimize it. The number of people killed is definitely less than, let's say, less than 50. It's only been less than 50. But look at the amount of paranoia that has grown within certain communities concerning the police, concerning incarceration. So when you think about the effect of the family, if such a small, very important, but small number have died at the hands of police and in incarceration and being held, and you see what it's done to the whole nation. So imagine with one person getting arrested, what that does to just the family. It wrecks it. Yeah, it completely wrecks it.
Yeah.
That's a good,
And if you're thinking about, and if we're talking about, in a financial sense, when individuals are getting arrested, and you got that, you're taking away that breadwinner, you're taking away that person that provides for the family. Just look how broken down a family can be. We know that a nuclear family is the best for a child, for the most part. Right. Mom, dad.
As long as everyone's healthy.
As long as everyone's healthy, mom and dad, that's the most, right? You take one of those units away, or you take one of those pieces away from a unit, what does that do for the child, right? What kind of trauma does that bring on for the child? Correct. What kind of trauma does it bring on for the child if they gotta visit their parent in jail on a weekly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly basis? Right. You know what I'm saying? They start to internalize that type of stuff, and that's the type of impact that it has on the family. And we're not even talking about when you get convicted, when you can't vote, when you have trouble getting housing, when you have trouble getting jobs, all of that. So we're not even at that point yet, you know. But we're talking just straight when you get arrested, but the impact that it has on the family. And what sucks is because you have a lot of these, and I keep bringing it back to color, because it's important. I think
it's very important.
It's important, but you have a lot of this going on. You have a lot of this going on in communities of color where these certain individuals are being targeted, being highly policed, right? They're being highly policed in communities of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
absolutely.
So if you have communities of color being highly policed and a lot more, I don't even want to say a lot more. You have more arrests being occurring in these communities of color. What is that doing to the? Imagine we already talked about what's doing to the family, but imagine how that impacts the black family unit as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? And so, yeah, that's
what the whole documentary 13 on Netflix talks about, and it goes in deeper into the impact on the black family, black people in regards to the mass incarceration and new form of slavery, and how that just continues to break down the family, because if someone's in, then you gotta spend all this money. The amount of money you gotta spend if someone's in to make calls, to buy stuff. And so now that family is not even able to keep going, and then you have that going back again to the additional stress, and then that floats down to the family and other people, and so it's just the continuation of keeping the breakdown of black people. And you have to remember also when especially for the black men that are being arrested, that are already being profiled numerous times before they're actually been stopped, maybe not arrested, so they've already got that stress upon them. When we talked in our last one about the empowerment of black men, that you talked about, when you greet each other, you talk about, yeah, man, I just feel like, yeah, I'm making it,
right.
because it's just you're just
Game
constantly in a survival mode, because you don't know at what time, what am I going to do, or how am I going to survive, because I'm constantly being pushed and attacked and being profiled. So if you imagine, if you're always profiled, it messes with your identity, right? I'm always huge on identity. I'm always going to go back to identity, because that is your foundation. That is everything that you are. Once you know who you are, who you really are as a person, your strength, your characteristics. I'm not talking about what you do. I'm not talking about your career. I'm not talking about being a mom or a dad. I'm being you as an individual, as a person. Yeah.
Right.
Once you know that in your identity, then that's set. But when you have issues, that's going to be rocked. Anything you experience, if you're arrested, why? What's wrong with me? You're going to ask those questions, and it's about your identity. And it's going to get rocked. And if you have a firm enough foundation, you're just going to be able to just get back up. But some people don't even have that foundation of their identity and knowing who they are and being firm in that.
Think about that. Even in the beginning example that you gave with Browder, even you described he was a hero. He seemed like he had a great foundation.
Yeah,
and then after getting out, he
he did was heroic. He had the great strength, amazing resilience, and he's just like in the video.
It looked like it, huh?
He did, but he kept getting beat. His foundation wasn't strong enough. The characteristics were there, but the foundation wasn't.
The point that I make isn't necessarily the knock on Browder so much as it's once an individual gets arrested, and he's incarcerated, your whole identity changes. And it's only so much that anybody can take before they're beat down. And that's what's happening to many communities, but especially ours.
And that's because it's look at how
solitary confinement.
Look at the state of jails now. Right?
Man, yeah.
Like if you
not what they look like. I don't want to know. I'm not even laughing. I don't want to know.
If you have an idea, if you watched any one of these, I'm trying to think of it. If you ever watch Locked Up, and they show like these jails and they show these prisons, and if you see like the quarters that they live in, if you see the individuals, or I don't want to say the individuals that they're around, but the mindset that individuals take on in order to even just survive in jails and prisons.
You form a new identity.
You form a new identity. It's enough to break down that foundation, because you're in survival mode. You're literally treated as an animal in there. You're literally treated as an animal in there, and expected.
Animals are treated well.
Yeah, animals are treated better.
Much better.
It's crazy. It's ridiculous. But and it's not a form of rehabilitation in a Elizabeth sense. It's not at all. You know, and that's what jails are actually supposedly supposed to be. It's supposed to be rehabilitation, but it's not rehabilitation at all. It's just a place to house people who committed crimes, and only God knows what actually goes on in there. But it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it goes back to my thing that I'm really frustrated, make me so mad. Oh my gosh. I don't understand the point of you going to jail, you do your time, or just prison, and you do your time and you come out and you still got put on the thing that you
see, I wrote that. That's exactly what I wrote. I've
done the time. Like, you don't need to know that. That's none of your business. Like, and now that is not rehabilitation, that you are going to forever label me this person, but I did the time. I
become
did
a
the
form
crime.
of adult time out.
I did the time. That's it. We keep moving, right? No. You are labeled for the rest of your life as this person, as this monster, as this thing. But you did the time. That was the whole point. But you've got to put it on a job application.
And generally, if you put that on a job app, you can kiss that job goodbye.
Exactly.
We all know what that means.
And that's why prisons and jails is just a revolving door.
Oh,
that's exactly why.
Yeah.
Because they're targeting communities of color.
Right.
Okay.
Right? And so it's all set up, man. It's all set up.
Oh yeah. Because if I come out of jail, I'm rehabilitated. I want to go find a job, take care of myself and my family.